So, good morning. We're going to do our first real case today. I want to start with Moroni. Where's Moroni?
Right here.
Good. So, Moroni, I want to start with you and Angela. Very good. And Ryan Greenberg. Okay, so this makes it easy. And by the way, there are 3 Ryans in the class. I found, so there's Ryan Greenberg, and yeah, we've got Ryan Beck. Where's the other Ryan? So just so you know, if you're not sure somebody's name, guess Ryan. You might be right. So, Moroni, first question. Let's assume that you were hired. In fact, we have sent a number of our students to go work for Sears in their strategic planning area. And you've been hired by Sears or Kmart. Sears/Kmart, because they've acquired Kmart. They're now the same company. And they pull you onto a team and they say, you know, we want to figure out what is the secret sauce behind Walmart's success. And you've read this case, so you have this sort of information about what they do. And they say, Ryan, what is the single most important thing that you could point to that is, you know, that we could imitate at Walmart that would be most important to our success, doing what they do? What would you point to?
I would say that the biggest single reason for their success is their ability to work with suppliers and decrease costs. Okay,
so so your advice would be we've got to understand more about how supplier management practices, and what specifically do you think sort of goes on in that area that allows them to get lower costs?
Well, they are very coordinated with their suppliers, and they know where the suppliers' costs are coming from. Okay. I know in the article it talked so many times about different technologies that Walmart implemented to coordinate those things.
Okay, so they coordinate very closely with suppliers. So they know the costs of their suppliers, and then that allows them to work jointly to try and reduce those costs?
Yeah, even to the point where if suppliers aren't doing lowest cost methods, that they penalize their suppliers.
Okay. Any other reason they get lower costs from suppliers?
They have an advantage just because they have 8,000 something stores, and so they can bargain on prices.
Okay, so we'd also expect there might be a bargaining power.
Yeah, there's a lot of shelf space for suppliers.
Right, so they've got bargaining power with suppliers that should get them volume discounts, would probably be what we might expect. So if we at Sears and Kmart could just get the same pricing from suppliers and could work with them in a coordinated way to have low costs, that would be a big leap towards getting us close to Walmart's profitability.
Huge.
Okay, Angela?
I definitely agree. If I had to sum it up in one word, it would be bargaining power. I think they came into these small markets that didn't have any other. Their focus originally was on small area, like rural areas.
Okay.
And so they came in with this good strategy, and that's how they got all of their, that's how they built up their base, I guess, and became big and got their bargaining power. And now they're so big, I don't think anyone can really have the same power that they do.
Okay, so you're agreeing with the bargaining power as being critical here, but you said something else about their going into small towns. What does that have to?
It was their.
Is that different, or is that a different reason?
I think it depends on the time frame you're looking at. It was their original strategy. I don't think it's necessarily their strategy anymore, but I think that's how they got their bargaining power.
Was by going into small towns and competing against
like mom and
pops. Yeah. Okay. So, sort of small towns compete with mom and pops where they had a cost advantage because of the volumes that they were running. Okay? Ryan, agree, disagree? Would you
agree.
add something?
I agree. I want to add an overarching principle. I think that their supplier power was pretty intense, but I think their overall goal of being the lowest cost in all aspects of their business functions really led them. In the article, it talks about there's about 5 things where they would gain 1.something% above their competitors. It was basically because they just wanted to do it with least cost as possible, like the no frills policy, no regional offices. They just cut that completely out. That saved them 1.3%. They didn't deal with unions, which I think was huge. They explained they outsourced.
So that's the labor. So what I want to do. So you could argue it's that the way they manage their labor costs. That would be a separate one, right? It could be the way, and as you think about the different things they're doing, you're arguing that they're doing a lot of these things well. So in some ways, this falls into they have good management, right? They have really good management that focuses on low cost, and they just continue to find other ways, and sort of a low cost culture.
Right, and rather than just saying, because sometimes people want to make sure their employees are cared for, and they want to make sure when they move somewhere they have a nice hotel. They say, no, we'll put you in a cheap hotel, you won't stay there long, they keep their managers on the move all the time. So I think it wouldn't necessarily be enjoyable for a manager, but they feel like it's the least cost way for them to just get it done.
Okay. So if we could somehow have the same management team and have really effective management to continue to look for different ways to lower costs, that might be the thing we'd want to imitate more than anything else. Angela?
I think the other part of that is, like, if we're presenting this to Sears and Kmart, I don't know if we can really duplicate that sort of culture, though, because I think we'd alienate a lot of our kind of, like, in between, like, blue and white collar workers who aren't looking for something as cheap as Walmart kind of thing. So I think it would be detrimental to our customer base.
Okay, so so you think it's possible that the customers going to Sears and Kmart are actually higher end than the customers going to Walmart?
Well, Sears.
People agree with that?
Not Kmart.
Maybe Sears, but not Kmart. I mean, it's hard to imagine that there are people in the higher socioeconomic status that are going to come in. I have a choice between Walmart and Kmart. I think for most people they'd say I'm not sure it makes a difference. They're both low cost and not expected to be particularly high quality. But perhaps for Sears. Okay, I'm going to open it up to some of the rest of you. What do you think is the key? The key thing that Walmart has done that allows them to be more profitable than Kmart and Sears?
I
Yes.
actually have a question.
Rachel? Okay.
So it might not be a very good question, but so it kind of seems like after you're talking about it that Walmart's done like all these random things, like let's cut costs here and here and here, and I don't know. I don't think that it really was that way when they're kind of implementing their strategy. They might have been a lot more organized, and there might have been like a flow chart and a structure to it, like let's cut cuts here and here. So my question is, let's say that they did either way, either if they structured it and said let's cut costs in this bracket and this bracket too, or if they were just kind of random like, oh, we can do it here, let's just cut costs. Either way, do you think it could ever backfire? Maybe not on Walmart, but on a company that tried to just cut costs anywhere it could. Could that ever be a negative thing?
It could. It could. But let's wait and sort of talk about, because there are trade-offs. When you make certain choices, like if you're going to have your executives room together when they travel to save costs, you might lose executives who just say, I want a little bit more privacy when I travel than have to share a room to save money for the corporation. Right? So I think there are instances where companies could take actions to lower costs that may turn out to actually not provide the minimum required service that customers expect, or certain minimum kinds of things that employees might expect. Okay, so other things that you think drive the profitability differences at Walmart. Yes, tell me your first name again.
Laura.
Laura, okay, Laura.
So with the low cost culture, one thing that they really focus on is information technology. And they had the RFID system and
Okay.
scan and pay.
Let me just make sure I note here. So if we think about information technology, okay, tell me a little bit more about how you think that is a key driver of their success.
Well, the RFID, the main thing with that is they had a lot more efficiency with their suppliers, and they're able to
Okay.
identify problems in any system. Also, it reduces shrinkage a lot with their suppliers.
Okay, so this is really helpful in terms of feeding into what Moroni talked about, which was helping them be efficient with suppliers. How else did the information technology, though, help them, beyond just the supplier side?
Well, gave them a step up, and they were able to examine. They had a system where every store, every purchase made went into a database, and so then they were able to monitor and see trends with specific stores and make specific
Okay.
changes.
So it helps them with market trends, right, to see
Yeah.
what
And
things are
demographics.
coming, who's buying what. What else would it help them with?
Market trends, demographics, and they can find problems with specific stores, and they can look at why a specific store may be failing in comparison.
So it could give them information on sort of the higher performing stores, lower performing stores, that allows them to make decisions, right? Sort of high and low performers. How else can information technology help them? Kyle?
It did wonders for their distribution.
Okay.
They have their own distribution centers, which is a huge advantage for them, but their information technology allowed their, it said in the case that they had really good, it arrives at the distribution center and it's right back on a truck again because they tag everything. Someone already mentioned the RFID, but just because they knew exactly where everything was, it's almost like Toyota except not manufacturing. They can just keep their products moving quickly.
And how much lower are their distribution costs than the competition as a result of all the things they do?
About 1% of sales lower.
Is that what it said in the case? About 1%. So they save about 1% of sales because they have lower distribution costs. So this is, basically roughly 1% of sales cost savings relative to the competition. Is that very much?
Me?
Yeah, Aaron.
Yeah, that's a big difference. They said they spend about 1% more on IT than everyone else, which ends up being 5 to 10% more real money. And so they're saving that much money, and they're able to plow it back into the rest of their company.
So they spend 1% more.
Which is like 5 to 10% more real money. They spend 1% more on IT expenses.
On IT
and
expenses.
investing in IT structure and becoming a more efficient company as far as that goes. Which is, a lot more money in.
So this
real
looks to
terms.
me, if I spend 1% more and I get 1% savings, it seems like a wash.
It's 0.1.
It's 0.1. Okay. So if this is 0.1% more, because they're so much larger, it's still, you're saying absolute dollars.
Yeah.
It still is, pretty hefty amount, and it's saving them than 1%. So in fact, that's a reasonably good investment. You spend 0.1% more, but you're getting a 1% cost savings just on the distribution part of it. Okay? Yes, Matt?
I'd just add to that list that it also made their suppliers more powerful, or it made them have a greater incentive to help Walmart because they could give them up to date, this minute, this is how many of your products we've sold. They have that in-store data that really helped their manufacturers.
So not only does it give them information on high and low performers, but a lot of information on in-store data to make decisions as well. Evan?
Can I add another point, or are we still going to IT?
If there's any, let me get a couple more points on IT, and then we'll jump to something else. So I'll come to you next.
Yeah, I think also involved in IT is the S&P system, the scan and pay system, which didn't make Walmart have that as an account payable until it's off their shelves. And I think that helped with their efficiency. That also helped lower prices.
Okay, so they have scan and pay that helps with that. Jeff?
I have two things. I think with suppliers, I think creating the IT infrastructure that gives them such up-to-date information creates some sort of, switching cost for the supplier. Because when Walmart supplies the infrastructure, then the supplier doesn't need to do that. So that switching and not working with Walmart, that would add a cost for the supplier. And also with distribution.
So you're saying that the IT investment and this actually contributes to the bargaining power?
Yeah, it creates
they
a
have,
switching cost once they
increased.
have a supplier.
Okay.
I also think that according to the financials, from 2007 to 2011, the assets increased 22%, but inventory only increased 11%. So I think that shows that they have an efficient use of their assets, that as they have more space and more assets, that they're not using that extra slack to just have that equally amount of inventory, that they're still being really efficient with what they have.
Okay, good. Andre?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to it, kind of to sum it all up, because I believe that information technologies are actually the key of Walmart's success. Because there's a concept called, if you don't mind me reading, sustainable competitive advantage.
Okay.
Which actually states that not only is important in the beginning to have an advantage over some company, but more importantly, it's to sustain that advantage for a long period of time. And because of information technologies, it kind of works as a barrier.
This looks more like a barrier to imitation to you for Sears and Kmart. That's going to be hard to imitate.
Definitely, and
even though it's something that we'd want to imitate, it'd be hard. I want to come back to that. Okay, I want to. Steve, do you have one more item for this, and then I want to move to Evan on
just with
another
information
one.
technology. It also talked about how they invested in the satellite to reduce communication time costs with that.
Okay, so clearly this is an area that Walmart has invested in significantly to build capabilities, and it seems to be contributing to their competitive advantage. Okay, and what's not up there yet that you think we should get up there?
One thing I think that has to go with the effective management stuff, and it's not near like the most important thing, but I think their marketing strategy is really unique, as in the fact that they spend almost no money on advertising.
Okay.
And they still have sales that are greater than their competitors. Just the fact that all of their slogans throughout the years have been based on low price or saving money, and they spend more than almost 1.5% less of their sales than their competitors.
So they spend less than the competition. How do they get away with that?
I think, well, because of their slogan, because it is saving money and lower prices, it says in the case that they perform price checks in 99% of competitor stores every week. So by doing that, they ensure they have the lowest prices. Okay. So when consumers go to Walmart, they're confident that is the lowest price.
All right, so because they're so consistent about making sure that their value proposition, which is low prices, is sort of always there for customers, then the customers, you don't need to market as much, because we know you stand for low prices, and we believe it because you really have lower prices. And when I go in, if I do price checks or compare to what I'm paying other places, I'm pretty comfortable that in fact they are the low prices. So if you have a really clear value proposition and people understand it, maybe you don't have to market as much. Okay?
I just want to add to that also, since Walmart definitely dominates in the small towns and rural areas, and another discount competitor in those markets really doesn't exist strongly. So the people that live there in those towns, they know that there's Walmart there and it has the low prices. So Walmart definitely doesn't need to advertise heavily to those people that already depend on the stores.
Yeah, so when you go into a small town and you build a big Walmart store, it's like, who doesn't know you're there, right? I mean, for crying out loud, in the small towns, people hang out at the Walmarts, right? I mean, it's not like you really need to advertise, oh, by the way, we're here and we have low prices. It's sort of self-evident. So this sort of actually is one of the benefits of the small town. You're competing with mom and pops, and that makes it easier to have lower prices. But one of the other things that it does is, in terms of marketing, those costs are going to be lower because it just seems easier to reach folks as a result of that. Okay?
Yeah, I think adding on to the small towns a little bit as well, it's interesting that Walmart went into small towns where Sears and Kmart and others did because it's profitable. So as a strategic decision, they didn't enter that market. And I think Walmart sort of going into a smaller, unwanted market was able to expand from that. And I think that was sort of the initial competitive advantage, and they were able to build off that competitive advantage using everything else, using bare bones.
Okay. So there was less competition, so to speak, at least from other discount chains in those small town markets. Okay, have we missed anything, or does someone want to add something else? Whitney?
I thought a big one was the non-unionized labor. Like
Okay.
they kept all their employees, they started them young, and so they didn't have to spend as much training, and without the union they cut a lot of costs and things like that.
No union. Does Walmart seem like a kind of company you want to have to negotiate with? Whitney? Why?
Because they have so much power. Like nobody really stands a chance against them.
What happens if people try to unionize?
They just move on. They shut it down.
Well, we have a case where in Canada they tried to unionize, and Walmart's response was, fine, you can have a union, but there won't be a store. They close the store. Everybody loses their jobs. That's a pretty powerful signal about how you're going to deal. Now, a lot of people would say, that does not seem very labor-friendly, right? This sounds to me like they're strong-arming their labor into taking less money, and if you don't like it, you can lump it, so to speak, because we have the bargaining power, we have the stores, and if you don't want to play by our rules, then we're not going to play. So I think that they certainly have no union. A lot of people would say these are pretty tough practices in terms of the way they negotiate to try and get them those lower labor costs. But how much lower are their labor costs?
A lot.
Okay, a lot.
1.1%.
Thank you. Yeah, so one of the things we're going to look for is, and when we're trying to drill down, is we want precision in terms of, if I'm asking how much of this or how much of that, a lot of people say, oh, it's big or huge or a lot. You know, that doesn't help me nearly as much as if I know it's 1.1% lower labor costs because of that. So clearly this is not insignificant. I mean, this, when you think about 1.1%, you know, you go along with, 1% here. Both of those seem to be contributing in a major way to the cost advantage that they have. Yes, is it Peter?
Yes, it is. Something I was going to say about the small towns
Uh-huh.
is in order to maintain that competitive advantage, it's important not to be easily imitable. And I think having that presence in small towns, Sears and Kmart can't just enter these towns that are already dominated by Walmart. And because of that, they maintain that market share without really having to do much.
So Andre argued that this was hard to imitate, and you're arguing that this is hard to imitate.
Right. Walmart has over 1,700 stores in rural towns that have population less than like 50,000. That being the case, if a Target were to go in and put it in a store, I don't think they'd be able to survive with Walmart already having that presence and that loyalty from that entire market.
So Walmart is already there. So that makes it a little bit tougher to go in with your store. They've already got a store, so it's not clear that there's sort of room for two stores in the smaller towns. Johannes?
So I was reading something like about Target BP. It says that it can never compete with Walmart for low cost. So I think one of the things that, especially consumers in North America, what they want is also quality service and the feeling when they come to the store, like they want to feel good. So maybe what they should do is renovate their stores to target.
To target a different customer.
I don't think anyone can compete with Walmart in terms of quality.
Yeah. So here's here we see Walmart comes in and is very successful with a low-cost strategy. At the time Walmart comes in as a discount retailer, we've got basically Target, and they have Dayton stores, they have Bradley's, there are a number of other of these discount stores, there's Sears, there's Kmart. And what Target does is they basically say, we can't compete on cost, so we're going to get out of the way. And we're going to focus on a different customer segment. We're going to have a little bit, we're still going to be low cost, but we're going to, like I said last time, we're going to be the Target, the little bit higher end of the low end. And we're going to probably put our stores in areas where people are a little bit more affluent. So one option is, let's not bother imitating anything about Walmart, even though Sears and Kmart have been low cost. That's been their strategy. We got to figure out a way to get out of the way altogether. fair enough. That could be.
I think
and-
quality service is very important.
Yeah,
here
that could be an
somehow.
option. Juanita?
Yeah, so just along that point, when you're looking, I found Porter's generic comparative strategies, and you're just comparing the comparative advantage and their scope. They're clearly the cost leader because they have the cost advantage and their scope is huge. The next largest competitor has about 1,000 stores fewer, you know? So it's this massive, huge approach where you're cutting down your competition because you have far more in terms of volume and in terms of price.
So there's really no way to enter this market and successfully compete on cost with Walmart.
Not with this strategy, no.
Has anybody entered this market and been successful competing with Walmart on low cost? Who?
Aldi.
So Aldi actually, so we have someone who's come in to the market and competing. Has anybody ever been to an Aldi? Okay, so we've got some Aldi shoppers here. Are Aldi's prices, do you think, lower than Walmart's?
Yeah, they're a lot lower.
It's junky stuff, but they're a lot lower. You want to tell us about your Aldi experience?
So yeah, Aldi was scary. Like, I didn't go to Aldi's, but I was on my mission, and it was like a whole bunch.
And where were you?
I was in Tennessee.
Okay, Tennessee.
Middle Tennessee. And so, like, I mean, I think every missionary has like their staple set of foods. Like at Walmart, it costs like $22 a week, and I knew every PA I was going to spend $22 at Walmart. But at Aldi, I spent like $18, and so I had $4 to go bowling or something. So, I mean, Aldi was a lot cheaper, and it's just bare bones, not very many things. It's all Aldi brand. You had to pay a quarter to use their grocery cart, and they didn't accept credit cards or debit cards, cash only, because that was their way of cutting costs. Their thought with the quarter, when you returned your cart, you got your quarter back, so they didn't have to hire someone to go out and wrangle carts. And there was like 4 employees, really low.
4 employees for
like just total, like in the whole store. Like they were just at the front, and it was always really small. But I would say Aldi's isn't a direct competitor because they only sold food. I mean, in small amounts of it. Walmart, you buy everything, but Aldi, I would consider a direct competitor of Walmart.
Okay, anybody else want to talk about Aldi or have their...
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. I mean, my experience with Aldi is exclusively in Europe, but I know that it is, I mean, in terms of size, it's so much smaller than a Walmart or a Walmart Supercenter. And like was just said, they seem to almost exclusively focus on groceries, and every once in a while they'd be selling like an external hard drive or something. So I don't know, like, I don't know.
Some random program.
No, really, that's how it was.
Pick up your milk and your external hard drive.
So I'm not sure if, I don't know how they are in the United States, but I'm not sure if they should be considered a direct competitor. That was the big question that arose in my mind, at least when I was reading it.
Certainly they're a direct competitor in grocery.
Yeah, that's true.
But what we're saying is in terms of the value proposition that Walmart's offering, Walmart's value proposition goes beyond prices. It also goes to the breadth of goods offered.
Yes.
Right? So when we think about value proposition or the value, why you win with customers, one is low price, and one element of it could be low price. But then there's also these secondary things that you add on to the value proposition. That it's not only low price, but I can get maybe everything I need at this one place. It's a one-stop shop, so it's more convenient. And therefore, I may pick Walmart over an Aldi, even though Aldi could be lower price on certain items. Okay, Jane?
Well, if we talk about that, I think Amazon is the main competitor because they have that exact same variety and they have some lower costs than Walmart.
Yeah, so Walmart has come in and they've been very successful competing as a discounter. So one of the things that I have learned over the years is that you will often see a company that looks unassailable, right? So in different areas, in different businesses. So for example, in the 1980s, the technology company that people viewed as unassailable was IBM. Okay, you're too young to remember that, but when I graduated from here with my undergraduate and then my MBA, it was Big Blue. IBM dominated computers. They dominated sort of everything in technology, and it was like nobody's going to ever displace IBM. And then the 90s come, and it's Microsoft, right? Microsoft actually has this sort of unassailable position because they have the operating systems, they've got the application software. They emerge, become more dominant than IBM, so to speak, and it looks like they're unassailable. And then we see, Apple start to emerge, and they've been quite successful. And so you look at Walmart, and you can you sort of look at their size and their scale, and you think, geez, it seems like they're unassailable. And then someone comes up with an idea to offer, like Aldi, a narrower product range, all store brands in effect. And we're not going to do any national brands, all store brands. And they come in with a low-cost strategy, and they can be quite successful. And Amazon comes in and does it with, selling over the internet. So it seems like there's always these ways that we have new competitors that crop up to compete with the existing ones. All right, if I haven't called on you, keep your hand up, because I want to get folks that I haven't called on yet today. Right?
After I read this case, I need to go grocery shopping, so I thought I might as well go to Walmart and see what I was doing. So I did notice the narrow aisles and the pallets in the aisles. They talked about that, how the recession made it and stuff. But one thing I really noticed was the store brand, the great value that the case talked about, how Walmart has very high margins on the store brand. And as I noticed there, I was looking at the cheese, at cheddar cheese, and they had actual equal space for Kraft, for all the name brand, and for great value. And the great value was only about 10% cheaper, 25 cents or so. And so I thought that was really interesting that they have high margins on the great value brand for a whole wide variety of products. So it seems like they may be even copying the Aldi strategy of where it may only be 10% cheaper in cost or price, but it's maybe 20, 30, or 40% less in value. That the Kraft brand is much higher quality, but it's only 10%.
So if we think about marketing and product mix as part of that, the store brands seem to contribute to the profitability that Walmart has, because basically as long as I'm less than the national brand, someone who's really price sensitive is going to pick that. And I'm going to make more money on that brand than I will on the national brand. Right. Okay. Philip. Okay.
I just wanted to go back to the no unions.
Okay. Labor. Okay.
Yeah, labor management, and I thought it was interesting. I actually looked at the revenue per employee, and Walmart's was 6% greater than Target's, and I thought that they also play hardball when these unions come in, but I guess that executive had the quote, "People live to work for the glory of Walmart" or something like that. I thought that was kind of crap, but looking back.
But they try and create a culture where people want to work there. I mean, there is sort of this issue: is it just tough practices, or have they created this culture that people actually sort of buy into this, and therefore they want to, they want to be at Walmart? Yeah.
Sure. And then I was just going to say, I saw some parallels between Nucor and Bethlehem Steel. How Bethlehem Steel, they kind of had the opposite approach. Nucor took a similar approach. They were able to keep unions out. They didn't have to deal with those adversarial labor kind of issues. And as a result, their revenue, Nucor revenue per employees continued to grow, and they continued to gain market share and finally overtake Bethlehem Steel. And so I just thought that was an interesting kind of wrinkle looking at the metric for how effective was it.
Yeah, labor is certainly a big component of costs and an important thing to manage. Now, is there anything that we don't have here or here, a separate category that you would like to put up on the board? A brand new category. Jake?
I don't know if this would be considered a factor in itself, but I think that it's been alluded to several times, the fact that the single greatest factor that Walmart has is an economy of scale. And if you look at it from the 5 factors, all of these sort of allude to it, but I think all of these are means to an end of creating Walmart as an economy of scale. If you look at it from the 5 factors that Michael Porter talked about, because it's so big, suppliers have very little bargaining power. Buyers then also have very little bargaining power because they have high costs to switching to a more expensive alternative or a farther away alternative, especially in rural towns. If you look at it from a rivalry perspective, nobody wants to go in and compete directly with Walmart because they're so huge. And also, their imitation, the barriers to imitation are extremely high because their costs are so low, because they can spread it out over so many stores. You mentioned before how many, just the pure scope, and somebody else said the next greatest competitor has 1,000 fewer stores. To spread those costs over 1,000 more stores is just going to bring your costs down. And then, whatever the last one I was missing.
So it gives you bargaining power with suppliers, but it allows you to spread these fixed costs of G&A, of advertising, of all these other things.
Exactly, and I mean, advertising, you don't need to when you have such a presence. I mean, that just, it builds your
brand recognition when you're such an economy of scale. Everything sort of comes back to the pure scope of it. And I don't know if it was always like that. A lot of it is probably driven by those cost reductions, but
Okay,
by
so
now.
let me see. Is there any other new category that we want to get up here? Because I want to get up the final. Let me just take the last couple, and then let's go Chris and then Aubrey, and then we need to circle back to the rest of you and push on some of this. Chris.
So I think all of these, and a lot of them have overlapped more or less, but I would say the new category should be international expansion is the one area we haven't touched on. And yes, all these different factors that we mentioned help into their international expansion, but if you really analyze what Walmart has done on an international scale, it's very different from a lot of other companies in the way that they've expanded and how they've expanded. Namely, in their experience in China, which they've been very successful in, their adaptability in changing their store format and other things to the Chinese culture. Another aspect is that they're very ambitious in doing so, that they've expanded in not a greenfield manner, but they've done a lot of M&A. Like in the UK, they bought Asda. And for the most part, as a whole, I'd say that they've been an early introducer in going international, with the exception of Brazil, where they face a lot of resistance from other places like Carrefour. How do I say it, Peter?
Carrefour.
Carrefour, okay. Carrefour. So I think that that's been an aspect that they've really focused on and done a much better job than any of their competitors, especially as we've been talking about Sears.
Okay, Aubrey, last.
Mine was international, but I have a few more things to add. Just that they're able to very effectively respond to that geography and setting. They ended up, exiting Germany and Korea because they couldn't handle it. But in Europe and China, they were able to add local products and provide higher quality in China because that's what the Chinese wanted in Walmart. And another thing that I thought was interesting was that in places where competitors are quite close, they have lower prices in stores, but when they don't have competitors nearby, they raise their prices slightly. So in an international and economies of scale type thing, they're able to kind of give and take across coverage.
Okay, so I think you could argue internationally that their performance is mixed, right? They've done okay in some markets, but they haven't done well. To actually exit markets, that's a bad sign. I mean, that's a sign that you failed, right? When you go into a market and you actually leave, they left Germany, they left Korea, they have not done very well in Brazil, and that's sort of widely known. You'd have to say they didn't do too well in those markets. They seem to be doing okay in China, right? They're still growing internationally. I think there's a question as to whether the data would tell you that they have been highly successful internationally. Okay, so I want to go through now a thought experiment with you. And I'm going to make those of you who've proposed these different things, you are now the top management team at Sears and Kmart. Okay? And I am the CEO and the owner of Walmart. Since this is my thought experiment, I get to pick the company I want to run. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some of the things that you want. So let's go to Moroni. So Moroni supplier management practices. I am going to give you the management team that manages our supplier relationships. If I give you that management team, are you comfortable that within 5 years you can get some of the same benefits at Sears and Kmart that we have at Walmart?
Well, I am comfortable in some of the aspects, such as the IT coordination with suppliers, but as far as bargaining goes, and lowering their prices coming into the store, that would be a much harder pull because of the presence that Walmart already has.
Okay, so you want
information technology
too.
Oh, well, I think they kind of go together.
Okay, so I need to give you, let's see, we had, who had information technology here? So Laura, so So I'm going to give you the information technology, and I'm going to give you the pricing that we get from our suppliers. If you have the information technology people and the pricing we get from suppliers, are you comfortable that now you can compete effectively with Walmart on price and profitability?
Yes.
I
mean, Walmart has such a high bargaining power. Good card, even if you have those same costs, it's still hard to, like, compete.
So you think it's still going to be hard to compete, even if I give you the information technology people that run our information technology and the pricing?
Well, you don't have that much of a market share, but it'll help a lot. I think it'll put you on the track to still take over.
Do you think that's going to do it for them, the rest of you?
No.
That's not going to do it. Because they're missing what? Spencer, what are they missing? What else do they need?
I was going to say, I mean, the reputation that they've built with that supplier, I don't know if that's what you were looking for, but like
I'm just wondering, what else would you want? If you're running Sears and Kmart, I've basically agreed to give you my management team that runs suppliers and the management team that runs our information technology, and I've agreed to give you the pricing we get from suppliers. Right? That's like the most important stuff. So you'd think that would make a huge difference, right? So Ryan?
I think why this is such a difficult question, maybe for me in my mind, is that I think any decision that Kmart needs to make needs to be after heavily looking at Walmart. And like you said, maybe we can't make Kmart into Walmart, the next Walmart, but maybe you make Kmart into the next. I think we need to come up with their unique value proposition and say, okay, if we're going to be in a world with, even if we took all their information technology and the low cost relationship with suppliers, we still wouldn't win.
But what else would you need to win, Ryan?
I think maybe just change, maybe say what of their scope, what of the people who purchase from them.
But let's say we want to beat them on costs. I'm going to let you have stuff to help you beat them on costs, right? So I'm going to give you the information technology. I'm going to give you the supplier stuff. You like the management. What if I give you the top management team? I'm going to give you the top management team. Let's right now, the top management team from Walmart walks over to Sears and Kmart and says, we're in charge, guys. And we're taking the supplier management folks and the IT folks. Are you comfortable that you can now beat Walmart?
I mean, they have so many stores, more than us. They have so much more than us that even if they make a little incremental decisions better than us, it would yield such greater profits that even if we did, I mean, it would take us a long time, like people before said, overcome like this.
So what else do you need?
I think we're missing a huge part of why Walmart's successful, and it stems back to the small towns. I think the reason why they're successful in small towns is because of their cross-selling, that they have everything. When you go into Walmart, like for me, I consider myself more of not now, right now I'm pretty poor because I'm a student, but I don't go into Walmart because they have low prices. I go in because they have something that I need, say, like switch my car or contacts. And
their brand is known for that as well.
Yeah. And because of that, they have low enough prices to buy other stuff. I think the biggest...
Gregory, I'm going to give you the Walmart brand. Because just today, a one-time offer, you can have the management team, supplier, IT, systems, and I will let you take the Walmart signs. You can go put them on the Kmart stores. They are now Walmart, and you now have the brand as well to basically, because people know we're known as being good in all these areas in small towns.
But Kmart's or especially Sears' location is different. That Sears is located in shopping centers. So when you go to Sears, you go there, say you go for a Kenmore a washing machine or something like that, that then you can get other stuff from other places inside the mall. And Walmart, when you go there, normally they're not next to other things. They try to stay as far, and if they are next, it's a super center. So when you go to Walmart, you have to buy everything from Walmart unless you want to take 30 minutes to go through their checkout line.
So you're still not comfortable that you can beat Walmart if I give you the brand, the top management team, the supplier management folks, and the IT folks. You want
I think we just need a different strategy. We're a
You
different
want
company.
more. You need a different strategy, okay? Ryan?
I was just going to say two things. I think, first of all, I'm pretty comfortable saying if you gave us Walmart, we could outdo Walmart.
If you gave us the brand.
If you just gave us all of Walmart, which is essentially where we're going.
No, okay. I haven't given you all of Walmart
We can
yet.
follow up to that.
I haven't. What have I not given you? The labor. Okay. Who said labor? Okay. So I'm going to let you can pick any employee you want. You can take all of our employees that you want. Management team, store employees. They'll walk over. They will now run your stores. Scott, is that going to do it for you? You got the labor. You got the management team. You got the brand.
You know, right now I'm reading Good to Great, and I take it as gospel truth. And it says to get the right people on the bus, first off. And I think
Or the right people in the store, in this
yeah,
case.
Yeah. Okay. And so if you get the management team, I think everything else will follow. I mean, granted,
Who disagrees with Scott? If you get the management
more
team,
stores.
okay.
They have thousands more stores, but if they're properly led, then everything else will follow in time.
Benjamin, why do you disagree with him?
Oh, I was going to say something different.
Okay, who wants to disagree?
Okay,
Ben?
I think that this might be the point where you're trying to drive at, but even if you gave us the stores, you gave us a majority of the stores, the fact that all of these practices work together more effectively at Walmart than at Kmart means that Walmart is more efficient and is going to be more profitable over time. It's sustainable.
Not if they're mismanaged.
Yeah, not if they're mismanaged, perhaps. But what have I withheld so far?
The building.
The stores. I haven't given you the stores, and I haven't given you the distribution center. Okay? So the reason I'm withholding those is because I think those are the most important assets at Walmart. Are the stores themselves and the distribution centers. Why? Michael?
Because their value is in their store. Like all of their advertising can be done just through their stores. Their supply chain is so perfect because of their distribution centers. So my suggestion is go back 20 years in time, 30 years in time, and then start with all of these things. Then we can compete.
Yeah, so if we could only turn back time, Sears Kmart, you might be able to win. But otherwise, you won't be able to win. So let me just share some things here that I think it's important to understand. Okay. So if you look at a typical large city market at the time Walmart launches, let's say this is LA County. I lived in LA for a few years when I was going to UCLA, and let's say that the stores with X's, those are Sears, and then we had some Targets, right? And we had some Kmarts. And you basically have, they actually had some Bradleys at that time. You have a whole set of discount stores that are competing against each other for customers. So, Walmart's over here, way over here in the southeast, and here's Bentonville, Arkansas, right here. And here's the Walmart store that they put in. It like covers half the town. Now, one of the things we know from economics is that if you have perfect competition, what kind of returns do you make if you're a company? Okay. You don't make much money if there's perfect competition. Which of these two looks more like perfect competition? Right? This one looks more like perfect competition. What does this look like? Monopoly, right? It's like we've come into this market and we've put a bigger store than the mom and pops. And in fact, what's the differential in pricing? When Walmart competes where there's a discount store versus no competition. 6% higher prices. So that means they're charging 6% higher prices here than they would if they built a store in this market, right? What's their average return on sales? Walmart's. If we look at their operating profit to sales ratio, what is that? Anybody have it?
About 7 points.
Not gross margin.
7.6%.
7.6%. That's operating profit to sales. So is 6% pretty decent? Yeah, that's basically like the whole thing, right? So in fact, they have higher prices in the small town market than they would if they were competing in this market over here. Now, let me ask you, we've looked at the fact they have lower labor costs, right? They pay less. They don't have unions. Why do you think they can pay less to labor and not have them revolt and start again?
If they're in a small town, there's probably not a lot of other places to go to get a job.
Yeah. Any of you who've grown up in a small town know that the wages tend to be lower in small towns. Why?
Less competition.
There's less substitution. There are fewer other jobs competing. Okay. What about the cost of living in a small town? Why is it lower? No one wants to live there. Why is it lower? Real estate's cheaper, right? Land is cheaper in a small town. In LA County, the cost to buy the land to put a store is going to be far higher than it is in Bentonville, Arkansas, Bentonville or Viroqua, Wisconsin, right? Or any of these other small towns that they chose. So when we think about some of their costs, do they have lower rent costs? Do they have less? Do they spend less on stores?
Yeah.
Did they say that in the case? How much less? Think about on the pricing side, they have 6% higher prices, but on the cost side, their labor costs are lower because you're in the small town. What about rent? Rent's over, they spend about a 1% or more less on rent because land is cheaper, right? And then think about advertising. As was mentioned, someone said, heck, you don't have to actually advertise. It's like, who doesn't know you're there? You don't advertise. Walmart, for the first 25 years, never did a TV ad. Because you didn't need to advertise. People knew you were there. So you've got lower labor costs. You have low rent costs. You have lower advertising costs. And the beautiful thing about this is you've done it all without scale. Without bargaining power, right? In fact, if you look at Walmart's profitability over time, it looks something like this. Return on assets, return on equity, it sort of looks like this. Well, both of them sort of go like this. They're slightly declining. What does this do to your theory that the key to Walmart's success is bargaining power over suppliers? Or its economies of scale? Could that be it? If it's economies of scale or bargaining power, then that means my profit should be going up over time as I get bargaining power and as I get scale, right? If they were more profitable or just as profitable with the first 50 stores as they were the last 50 stores, then I don't think, even though bargaining power may matter and be important today, it's not the primary thing that explains their success. Chris?
So I agree and I understand why it's not economies of scale. But in terms of bargaining power, I still see that as an important factor because as they increase in size and just like sheer number of stores, they're obviously their assets are increasing substantially because that's probably the largest asset they can have are their stores. But at the same time, that they're also able to use that leverage to be able to decrease their overall costs. Unfortunately though, Walmart stores have been their format has been to keep costs consistently low, and because they've been entering new markets where they do not have such a price advantage like they do in rural areas, I can see why it would be declining, but that's still an advantage to them in the sense that they are able to gain that.
I agree. I agree it's an advantage to them. What I'm saying is it wasn't the secret sauce to Walmart's success as a company. Their strategy. So if we think about what was really important here was their choice of markets. Because they chose markets where they did not have competition and where they actually could charge higher prices while simultaneously having lower costs. That was the beauty of this strategy. When Sam Walmart launched this, conventional wisdom was, you don't put a discount store in a small town. It's not big enough to support it, right? So he went against conventional wisdom. And what he found by experimenting, by throwing that store in there and just trying, that in fact, oh geez, my costs are fairly low, they're pretty low, and I can charge higher prices. And one of the things he did learn was that he could not get distribution to those small towns very easily, because it was very expensive. And that was one of the reasons that Kmart and Target, Dayton Hudson, and Sears had not gone to small towns. Because you could, the cost to subcontract to bring trucking was very expensive. So as it expands, so what basically happens is you expands into a whole set of towns out from where he starts, and what he finds is that he's got to put in a distribution center. You draw these concentric circles around, and he has to go in to do his own distribution. Now today, in today's world, is the trend to do more activities as a firm, to what we call vertically integrate, or is it to outsource? Outsource. Yeah, we think about it, outsourcing tends to be the way we do things. But in this case, he didn't outsource trucking. He decided to bring it in-house because, in fact, there were not other, basically trucking organizations that could do it at the cost that he felt needed to be. That also meant he needed to invest in information technology to be able to coordinate with a bunch of stores in small towns. So they make big investments in the warehouses and in the information technology to manage these stores. And at some point in time, what happens then is that maybe Target or Kmart catches on to this strategy. And they say, oh, small towns, be there first. If we can get to the small town first, then that means we can be successful in those small towns, right?
They don't have the distribution.
But they don't have the distribution, so that means they're going to have to pay more for distribution if they do it. There are a couple of examples where they said, you know what, we're going to do it anyway. Because this town is growing and Walmart doesn't have a store there. And you know what Walmart did? They said, you know what, this is our territory. We're going to put our store there too. And then it's just back to, we're jumping into the pool and we're going to see who can stay up. And because they have distribution cost advantage, they could stay up. And they very quickly signal to their competitors, you don't go into small town markets where we have distribution. And they stole the page out of the playbook of software companies, which is announcing that something's coming to prevent people from trying other software. So you sort of say, they sometimes refer to it as vaporware. It's announced, it's coming, and so what they would say is, we are studying these towns to look at where we're going to put stores, which was a clear signal, don't come into these markets. Yes?
So would this apply to why the emerging markets like Brazil or other countries doesn't work as well? Because their infrastructure and the small towns there are a lot different than what they're like here.
Yes. So this is now not transferable. Imagine the skills you'd need to go and try a small rural town strategy in Brazil.
There's no money.
There's no money in small towns. It doesn't work, right? So you can't do it. Plus, think about the management expertise you'd need to be able to go into Brazil, into the small towns. So most of the emerging markets, this strategy doesn't work because there's no money in the small towns. You have to go to the big cities. And that puts you in competition with the Carrefours of the world and the local big players of the world. So it's not easily transferable. It's one of the reasons they have not been very successful in many of the international markets, because the strategy is not easily replicable.
I was just going to mention on your previous point, I was at Utah State for a couple of years, and there's a Walmart in North Logan, and as Logan was expanding, there was a lot that it was rumored Target was considering, and before Target could really lay claim, Walmart just put another super center at the exact opposite end of town.
Yeah.
And everybody just went, oh, not another Walmart, because they wanted a different store.
And in the bigger cities, actually, what you often see Walmart doing is they often put their stores close to the Kmarts. Because what they want to do is they want to make sure convenience now is not a difference. Remember we talked about the grocery store strategy? If the Walmart's close to the new Walmart's close to the old Kmart, it's just a matter of time before the Kmart's dead. They'd rather go in and kill the old store rather than be farther, too far away and let the store continue to survive and compete. Now, You remember, yes, Floyd?
I just thought you said something interesting earlier when you were saying like if you gave Kmart the stores and the distribution centers, then you get.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to give them the stores and the distribution centers because the store locations for me in the rural areas. Did you see the difference in the number of stores in the rural areas?
Yeah.
Okay. So because they have so many stores in the rural areas where they're getting the higher prices and lower costs, and they have a barrier to imitation. Because they're first in the market, it's very hard to come in second with a store. If the town's too small, then basically both stores can't survive.
Right, I agree that that's the reason why they've succeeded, but I feel like even if you gave Kmart all of the resources of Walmart, you wouldn't be able to beat Walmart, you would just be Walmart.
You would be Walmart, absolutely.
You would just equal Walmart.
That's right,
And
that's right.
so I think the only way you can beat Walmart is to do something differently, like Aldi or Amazon is then have a competitive advantage.
Good. Yes, no, and that's what strategy is about. It's finding a different position that works relative to the competition. Now you remember on the top of that grocery store company list in terms of profitability was Weiss Markets. So I remember when I was doing that project, I was the manager on that project, I sent a team down to visit some Weiss Markets, most profitable grocery store chain in the US. I'm expecting them to come back with some good stuff. And they come back and they are spectacularly unimpressed with Weiss Markets. And they're like, we just don't get it. I mean, the stores are kind of cruddy. They're not that great. They're in these small towns in Pennsylvania and West Virginia. But what we realized is that in most cases they were the only game in town. And this was like the Walmart strategy. If you're the only game in town, in a small town, in your grocery store, you could probably charge higher prices and you probably have lower costs, at least on the labor side, on the rent side, right, on the advertising side. And this helped them to be very profitable. So one of the things you might want to think about when you're doing strategy is this markets that we choose, and it could be geographic markets, right, could be product markets, is really important in terms of choosing where we want to compete and where we want to succeed. So let me just take you through a few slides that summarize some of the key ideas from today's class. So I want to talk about Walmart's value proposition. So if you think about a value proposition, what you want to start with is, well, what are customers considering when they choose a store to buy things, a retail store? Well, it could be low prices, could be a broad selection across categories, could be in rural areas, rural convenience, where it's close to us, reliable prices, merchandise quality, suburban convenience, selection within categories. This would be like Best Buy, deep selection within categories, sales help, ambiance. And there was a survey that was done comparing Walmart, Kmart, and Sears in mom and pop stores. And this is what Walmart looks like, right? You go to Walmart for the low prices and the broad selections and the rural convenience. You don't go there for the sales help and the ambiance. That's probably not a big surprise, right? That's the value proposition that they're offering. This is why they win with customers. When you look at Sears and Kmart, they're sort of all around the board. They don't have as low prices. They actually have just as good a selection across categories in most cases. They're not convenient in rural areas at all. Their prices are not reliable. It's one thing, they don't have the everyday low pricing. They're sort of up and down, and people see that. Merchandise quality is actually viewed as a little bit better on average compared to Walmart. A little bit more convenient, and they're a little bit better in terms of the last three items as well. So there are some people who tend to shop at those stores. And then, of course, the mom and pops are also all over the board in terms of what they offer. Being clear about why you win with customers is really important. Once you select those markets, it's important to figure out why are we going to win with customers. So let's think about how we might, in one sentence, describe Walmart's value proposition. Everyday low prices for a broad range of goods that are always in stock in convenient locations. If you can, in one sentence, do a nice job of describing why you win with customers, and then you deliver on that, then you've probably got a pretty clear strategy. This is the unique value we offer. We have the lowest prices across the broad range of goods. It's one-stop shop, and we are going to be relatively convenient to you, whether you're rural or today actually in the suburban areas.
So I was wondering, if you're the CEO of Sears, like, what would you do? Like,
so if you're the CEO of Sears, the good news, Johannes, is you're going to have an opportunity to answer that later in our course. Each team is going to come up with a strategy for Sears Kmart, and you're going to tell me what the strategy for Sears Kmart should be. Okay? And then after that, you can ask me what I think. Okay? All right, how Walmart wins. So how do they do it? How do they deliver unique value? So we've chosen the markets. They start with small towns. Then they decide on the value propositions, and this is how they win. They're the first to locate discount stores in cities with less than 50,000 population. And therefore, it's pretty easy to have low prices relative to the mom and pops, even though prices are actually 6% higher than what you'd find at a discount store where there's competition. In 2003, they had 1,762 stores in rural America versus 4,876 stores for Kmart and only 48 for Target. So you can see real differences in their choice of markets. And Target, has Target been successful? Target actually has been quite successful, but they've chosen a very different set of markets. Their demographic is not in small towns. Their store prices are 6% higher in the small town markets than in no competition markets. And by locating stores in small towns, this allows them to have lower advertising costs, lower labor costs, and lower store rental and land expense. Let's talk a little bit more about how they win. They built distribution capabilities that other companies didn't have, and they basically were forced to do that because they chose small town markets, and there was no readily available distribution. So they've developed, one of the most technologically advanced distribution networks. They've invested a lot in information technology. This now is a source of competitive advantage on how they deliver on this strategy. Of course, because they've been able to grow, they now have bargaining power over suppliers. So this is also a source of competitive advantage today. And we also know that they have fewer layers of management. This is just a matter of being frugal and being effective in management. That is also a contributor to the cost advantage. And they have a culture of cost reduction. All of these things matter and contribute. But I would argue that the key to their strategy initially was their choice of markets that allowed them to bring a value proposition that was different in those particular markets than had been offered before. Yes, Jeff?
And I mean, that came to mind, but then I think, okay, but who are we addressing? We're addressing Sears and Kmart. In fact, we're not in the 1960s where that is an untapped possibility.
So what's happened is game is over.
Okay.
So why is it sustainable? This is the fourth choice. The game is over here. And it's because competitors will rationally refuse to enter the Walmart towns, the rural towns. And they rationally refuse to enter those towns because, in fact, they can't make money in a town that already has a discount store. So Walmart's advantage is sustainable due to what we call a first mover advantage. Now, just because you move first does not mean you necessarily have an advantage that's sustainable. Apple was not the first company to launch an MP3 player, right? That was Rio. So Rios were out. They should have had the first mover advantage. What happened? What's that?
You only put 15 songs on Rio.
You can only put 15 songs on a Rio.
Apple did it better.
Apple did it better. So the later firm came and did it better. So what's different between Walmart being first? Why not just go in and do it better in the small town?
There's no barrier.
Okay. There's not a barrier to entry in the same way with Rio and Apple as there was with Walmart and Kmart or Sears.
Like in the MP3 market, there's obviously no natural monopoly you can conquer. There's no area that you have a continued advantage. Whereas in Walmart's case, the main reason why people go to certain stores is because of location, and therefore by controlling the locations, they control.
Yeah. So in this case, you preempt by if you actually can go in and build a store first in a particular location, that actually can be a source of competitive advantage unless someone could come in with a far superior value proposition to you. So in this case, it was sustainable due to being first in a small town market that created what I think of as a natural monopoly in a geographic area. Yes?
Yeah, and I think first mover advantage is more sustainable when technology is not rapidly improving. They did an HBR article on that. And Walmart, really, grocery stores, there's not a lot of rapid technology change. So
Yeah.
they were able to sustain that while in the MP3 player market, same thing with disk drives and a lot of other markets, because there's so much rapid change, first mover advantage isn't as sustainable.
Yeah, and we'll talk more later in the course about first mover advantages and when they're sustainable and when they're not. When you can actually preempt by owning scarce resources, scarce land or whatever, then that actually can be a source of advantage. Let me just get through these last couple of slides. So I would actually argue that Walmart's success has more to do with strategy and positioning than just operational efficiency. They became operationally efficient. There's no question about it. But in fact, this choice of markets was really important to their success. The final thing I want to talk about today is just highlighting multiple levels of strategic analysis. So for the most part in this class, we're going to be talking about business unit strategy. And the business unit here is basically discount retailing. But, and then we're going to talk about, how do the functional strategies align to support the overall business unit strategy. There actually is a higher level of strategy, which we call corporate strategy, which is trying to figure out which businesses to be in the first place. So like General Electric, they are in lighting business, they're in appliances business, they're in finance business. These are separate businesses that don't seem to be necessarily connected. And they try and find some synergies. But the corporate level is trying to figure out, it's like Amazon saying, we're going to be in discount retailing, but we're also going to do the Kindle Fire. We're also going to do web hosting services. These seem to be, they may be related in some way, but they seem to be different businesses. So corporate level is trying to figure out which arenas are we going to compete in terms of industries. And then once you have a business unit in a particular industry, then we worry about business unit strategy. And that's then the choice of markets in that industry, unique value, how do we deliver the unique value, and how do we create sustainable competitive advantage. Okay, we'll see you next, actually it's next Wednesday. Isn't it?